Just start. The only formal part is just an introduction. Who you are, what you do. And strangely, I always ask people what your favorite dessert is.
Okay. Well, my name's Chris Jones. I'm the Democratic candidate for Iowa Secretary of Agriculture. My favorite dessert would be homemade ice cream.
Okay. And so, Chris, the reason I wanted to chat with you today is to talk about a topic I've heard about, but I sincerely can tell you I don't know anything about it, except I do know it's used in some type of fuel mixture, but the case of ethanol. And I'm going to try to ask questions that are like on a fifth grade level from someone that doesn't live in Iowa. Mm-hmm. So, and in most basic form, what is ethanol?
Well, ethanol is what we refer to as grain alcohol. And so it's made when we ferment grain. And so you can make ethanol from lots of different things. But, here in Iowa, we make it from corn. It's the same ethanol that's in whiskey and beer and wine. It's the exact same thing. But the chemical compound of ethanol that we distill from corn here in Iowa is then blended into gasoline across the United States. And that's according to federal law that about 15 billion gallons of ethanol is required to be blended into gasoline across the United States. And so almost everyone in the U.S. is putting ethanol into their gas tank.
So even when I just go get like regular unleaded 87, that has ethanol built into the deal, the ingredients?
Almost always, yes.
Okay, wow. Okay.
And especially here in Iowa. And so we've been using corn in this way in Iowa clear back into the 1970s. I can remember in high school filling my car up, and at that time we called it gasohol here. But then the use of corn in this manner really took off after 2005. And that's when we saw the Energy Policy Act of 2005 was passed, signed by the president, and that included what was called the Renewable Fuel Standard. And that required a blending of fuels from non-petroleum sources be blended into gasoline and diesel at increasing amounts each year. And so each year there was an incremental increase, and that topped out at 15 billion gallons here in recent years. And so, about 60% of our corn in Iowa is used in this way to produce ethanol. And so we have an area of land of about 13,000 square miles. 1/4 of our state is used to grow corn for fuel ethanol.
Wow. Okay. So does that mean that the original idea behind ethanol was for an altruistic purpose? They were trying to wean us off of fossil fuels?
So there's been a lot of rationalizations for it over the years. Firstly, there was an idea that adding an oxygenate, what we call an oxygenate, to gasoline would make it burn cleaner, if you will. And so that was the original rationalization, even prior to the renewable fuel standard. And so ethanol has an oxygen atom in it, and so when it's burned in gasoline, you reduce some of the emissions. We also had MTBE that was...
I remember. I see that at the gas pump, don't I? Isn't there like a little sticker?
You used to see MTBE.
Yeah.
MTBE is not used much anymore.
Okay.
Because these underground storage tanks that had MTBE in them leaked, and this polluted the groundwater, and so there's not much MTBE used anymore. But it was used in the same way. It has an oxygen atom in it, and so it was an oxygenated fuel that when burned in internal combustion engines would reduce some emissions.
Okay.
But as engines have become cleaner, more efficient over the years, that rationalization is not quite as valid. We also went through a period where we advertised that ethanol reduced dependence on foreign oil. And so if we were blending, say, 10 to 15% into the nation's gasoline supply, that theoretically would reduce our dependence on foreign oil. But now we have the largest petroleum producing country in the world now. We produce more petroleum than any other country. And so that rationalization has kind of gone by the wayside. There's the reduced price at the pump. And so ethanol blends cost less at the pump than unblended gasoline. But that ignores the fact that we subsidize the production of corn, pretty substantially at the federal level.
Well, originally, was it posited as a clean energy sort of idea or a cleaner energy idea, but the real reason behind it was so there would be a market to sell more corn?
So the main driver here was to figure out a way to get rid of some of this surplus corn.
Okay.
And so we have always overproduced corn in this country, but over the last, say, 50 years, yields have gone up quite a lot. Corn yields on a per acre basis have gone up quite a lot. And so, without ethanol, there's no way that the country could absorb all this corn that farmers grow. And so it's not just here in Iowa, it's, many other states too. And so the proximate, I should say, reason that we began this is to try to consume this surplus corn.
Okay.
But the ethanol industry's rationale here has evolved, over the years, from reducing dependence on foreign oil to reducing emissions to reducing the price at the pump. And now finally we're at a place where the industry wants to talk about the positive effects on climate change that burning ethanol in our cars would have. And so that's a rather dubious claim, but that's where we're at right now is, because these other things have become less important, the emissions component is less important as engines have become better and more efficient. The reliance on foreign oil has become less important as the United States has developed all these sources of oil.
Mm-hmm.
And the price of the pump is, sort of smoke and mirrors because we subsidize corn production. And so what we have left now is climate change. And so the industry would like to have us believe that using ethanol in our cars reduces CO2 emissions, but that's pretty dubious. So there's been research that actually shows the opposite, that blending ethanol into our gasoline increases greenhouse gas emissions.
So also, and this might be wrong, what I'm thinking I'm hearing is that since its beginning, it's sort of has it also evolved into sort of a, now we're too big to fail because now it's part of this big system. And I was thinking about the thing, now I did see on your Substack the other day, I saw just a post on Facebook where you had done what I think you called a crayon drawing.
Yeah, conceptual model.
Yeah, which was interesting. And I was just thinking, okay, I got to make sure I ask Chris about this. How does ethanol production fit into what's happening in terms of our water quality here in the state of Iowa? Because in my mind, I'm just like, well, it sounds like we just get a lot of corn off the land. They somehow turn it into ethanol and they ship it to places where it's mixed with gasoline. How is that bad for Iowa's water?
Well, producing corn is bad for Iowa's water. And so we fertilize corn with nitrogen fertilizers. Those ultimately end up as nitrate in the environment. That gets into our streams and lakes and aquifers. Nitrate is a regulated drinking water parameter.
Okay.
And so we have about 60 to 70 public water supplies around the state of Iowa that are impaired by nitrate.
Okay, I
60
see.
to 70
Yeah.
water supplies around the state of Iowa that are impaired by nitrate. We also have the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that's caused by the nitrogen and phosphorus that get into our streams and get down to the Gulf and cause these
Okay.
big algae blooms. And when the algae blooms die, they cause this dead zone in the Gulf.
Right. So I was thinking I was just thinking of ethanol like it's a thing that happens at the ethanol plant. But yeah, so the way we're propping up the corn, the way the corn is grown causes the environmental damage.
Correct.
Is there anything that happens at the ethanol facility that's sort of...
So yes, that's less of a concern than the actual production of corn, but their ethanol plants use a lot of water, for example, and so it's generally a rule of thumb now for every gallon of ethanol produced that requires 2 to 3 gallons of water to produce that ethanol.
Okay.
And then there's a discharge from these ethanol plants. And so we know that a lot of the things that are on corn, they're used to produce corn. The pesticides, for example, they'll make it through the whole process, survive the fermentation process, and can get discharged from the ethanol plant.
Yeah.
We also have air pollution from the ethanol plants. And this has been kind of a controversial topic, how the federal government hasn't regulated, the federal and state government have not regulated this very well.
Okay.
The air discharges or discharges into the air from these ethanol production facilities.
Okay, so here's a really out there question. If we could make ethanol production stop, which in turn means all this corn is no longer needing to be grown in the same way it is, which is damaging to our ecosystem, what would happen to, like, how do we undo it, I guess is what I'm asking.
So that's an important discussion, and the whole, is it too big to fail, is basically the discussion that we're having right now.
Yeah.
And so what do we do with all these acres? And so, as I said, we have 1/4 of the state the state's land that's used for this economic activity. Not 1/4 of the crop acres, 1/4 of the state's land. So what are we going to do with that land if ethanol goes away? Mm-hmm. And this is a discussion we need to have right now, because it's pretty clear that ethanol is, dying, so to speak. And so we know in the United States that there's a reduced demand for liquid fuels. People are driving less. Only about half of all 16-year-olds in the United States now have a driver's license.
Wow, that's great.
We see the emergence of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And the use of these scooters and whatnot, these alternative forms of transportation, the battery operated things that are not cars, the scooters, the mopeds, all that is taking a bite out of liquid fuel consumption in the U.S. And so we see a decline in liquid fuels here. Well, as liquid fuels decline, as the demand for liquid fuels declines, then the demand for ethanol is also going to decline, because the federal government, the renewable fuel standard, is requiring a certain percentage be blended in. And so when the total declines, then the percentage of ethanol declines too. And so that's why you see this push from politicians in the Corn Belt to get this year-round E15. Right now, we generally blend it in at 10%. So that's what we call E10.
Okay.
It's 90% gas, 10% ethanol. But now there's this big push for the federal government to allow year-round E15. We don't allow it in the summertime because it increases smog. But there's a push to allow E15 all year round. And so that's one way they can kind of get a tick up in demand if they can blend at higher ratios.
Okay. Do the ethanol plants have anything to do with, this is another topic that I still have not dived into yet, and I'm just wondering if it's connected. Are the ethanol plants somehow connected to the CO2 pipeline topic?
Yes.
Can we discuss that?
So ethanol, so EPA has what's called advanced biofuels. And so an advanced biofuel is one that reduces CO2 emissions by 50% compared to the petroleum product.
Do we have any advanced biofuels yet?
Soybean biodiesel is an advanced biofuel.
Okay.
Corn ethanol is not.
Because it's not, the percentage isn't right.
Correct.
Yeah.
It doesn't, the benefit isn't that large. And some research would say, that it actually produces more CO2 than gasoline. But at any rate, it's not an advanced biofuel.
Okay.
And it's looking very unlikely that ethanol will ever be an advanced biofuel unless they can capture the CO2 that comes off these ethanol plants, capture it, and then send it through a pipeline, in this case up to North Dakota, where it would be sent down into the bedrock and sequestered.
So they can't do it at the engine level after it's already a product. So they're trying to take it out before it even gets to the pump, and therefore be able to say our product helps. Yeah. That's such a contrived.
So imagine, I don't know, if you make beer or sourdough pancakes or something like that.
Yeah.
And it starts to bubble up.
Yeah.
That's CO2.
Okay.
So that's what happens in an ethanol plant when you're fermenting corn.
Oh.
The CO2 gas comes off the process. And so if they can capture that and then send that CO2, as I said, up to these bedrock formations in North Dakota, then they maybe can get advanced biofuel status because they can get credit for that CO2. And so, it's a circuitous sort of process here.
That is more ridiculous than I imagined the reality would be. Wow.
So what's worse is they have these oil wells in North Dakota that, they're kind of on their last leg and they're depleted, but there's still recalcitrant oil down there that could be perhaps gotten to.
Okay.
Well, one way to get to it is to pump the CO2 down into these oil wells, and that CO2 displaces the oil and causes the oil to come up, and so we can scavenge this recalcitrant oil from these oil wells. And so then it becomes even less of a climate change solution when we're using it essentially.
They're offsetting the value by bringing the oil up to then. Wow. Okay.
So that's on that conceptual model that was in my Substack.
Okay.
And so the big oil tycoon up there in North Dakota that's an investor in the pipeline, in the carbon pipeline, is Harold Hamm. And Harold Hamm is this billionaire guy, and he's funding Trump's ballroom. And
okay.
Yeah.
What is the name of the pipeline? Garda?
Summit.
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 So how far along is the pipeline?
So they haven't built much of it yet because they don't have all the easements that they need. And so in Iowa, they're close, and they have eminent domain of power. So the Iowa Utilities Board gave Summit Carbon Solutions eminent domain powers, so they can go in and they can condemn land and put the pipeline in if they have to, if they need to get the land. The problem is the South Dakota legislature has passed a state law that is problematic for them. I'm not sure, it's going to have to go through Minnesota too, and I'm not sure where it's at in Minnesota or North Dakota, but I know South Dakota is a big problem right now. And so, of course, they don't want to pay for all the easements here until, they've got a green light in these other states. Okay. But a lot of the easements have already been paid here.
Okay. Well, thanks for explaining that. That really fills in a lot of gaps for me. So we're not imminently looking, not to overuse the word imminent as eminent domain, but are we is there an immediacy to the pipeline issue? Like, is this 10 years in the future that we'll see this happen if it's not stopped? Or are we looking at 5 years from now, these things will be traveling across farmland through eminent domain? And
so we've been talking about this now for probably about 5 years. I'm a little surprised they haven't gotten it built yet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But again, I think events in these other states are really the main obstacle now.
Okay. Wow. One other headline I saw was about this large, over in the southeast, this is back to ethanol plant. There was I forget the name of it, darn it, the name of the city, but there was this really large ethanol plant built somewhere in southeast Iowa sort of recently. It was just really giant. Mm-hmm. And I believe the company wasn't even based in the USA or something.
So you might be thinking about the fertilizer plant at Weaver. And so that's in far southeast Iowa. And that was an Egyptian company that originally built the fertilizer plant.
That's it.
Is that
the same as ethanol?
No.
Oh, okay.
So the ethanol, the fertilizer, they're making ammonia there.
That's why. Okay. So this is totally different. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, the ammonia is used to fertilize corn. And so.
Oh, okay.
And so that ammonia gets made into other products, or it gets applied as ammonia. And that's what ends up as nitrate in our.
Yeah.
And so that fertilizer plant was originally built by this Roscom, I think is the name of the company.
Okay.
And they were based in Egypt. And they got some really favorable tax levies or tax abatements to build the plant. And this is going back maybe about 10 years ago now. And it was recently bought, the plant was recently bought by Koch Industries, which is the Koch brothers, Koch Industries, they have all these petroleum interests around the country. And so they own it now. And so that's a plant to make ammonia for fertilizer.
Okay. Is there any other byproduct that comes out of an ethanol plant that's noteworthy, or does pretty much all go to...
They want to talk a lot about these dried distiller grains, DDGs. And so not all of the corn gets produced into ethanol.
Okay.
There's some residual left behind, and it's can be fed to livestock, especially cattle.
Oh.
And so when you take corn and you make it into ethanol, about 70% of the calories go into ethanol, and about 30% go into this other stuff, DDGs.
What were you doing with your life before you decided to run for Secretary of Agriculture?
Well, I retired from my job in 2023, and that was working at the University of Iowa.
Okay. And
I had spent most of my career studying what we call contaminant hydrology in agricultural landscapes. And so that's just water pollution, essentially.
Yeah. How
it moves across the landscape in areas where farming is a predominant land use. And so that's what I did. I published, scientific papers. I managed the university's network of water quality sensors that are deployed around the state of Iowa.
So you worked with Larry Weber?
He was my boss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Larry Weber was my boss. And I worked closely with the Iowa Geological Survey. The state geologist, Keith Schilling, was my closest collaborator when I was working. And when I started at the University of Iowa in 2015, they asked me would I like to have a web page, and I said sure. And I knew from the outset that I would like to write a blog on my web page and post essays there about our work that we were doing.
Okay.
Because I've always felt that scientists, especially in the public sector, do a poor job of communicating their work to lay people.
Absolutely, they do.
And so I did that, and I'd say the first few years I really did not have many readers. Then by about 2019, in 2019 I wrote this piece called "This Is What Happened." It's just basically a synopsis of the history of Iowa water quality,
And
with the
that-
backdrop of agriculture and how agriculture changed and how water quality changed along with it.
Okay.
And so that one I got some real positive feedback from that one. And so that one was just a tiny bit provocative, honest. And so then as I continued to write, I, would make them more and more honest, I would put it. Some would say more and more provocative. And then finally, towards the end there, I had some farmer legislators, Republicans, didn't like what I was writing, and they came after me a couple times. And the second time, I just decided that, I'd had enough of this controversy, and I didn't want to imperil the jobs of people that I knew. And so I just decided to retire. And this was about the time my book came out. I published a book, The Swine Republic is a title. And
what year did that come out?
2023.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you spent 4 years working on that, or?
So, more than that, really.
Okay.
It's a collection of essays that just I aggregated.
Okay.
And the book was helped by this controversy surrounding my departure, for sure.
Okay.
But the book was selected for the Library of Congress National Book Festival. It was Iowa's representative for the National Book Festival. And so there was a lot of good publicity around the book. At the same time I retired, I started doing a Substack, and it's pretty widely read. And
I want to tell you a quick story. So before I started on this project, I was marketing director for a local home renovation company. And one of my jobs was to go in and shoot photos of interiors. And I wasn't working on any documentary projects. As a matter of fact, I'd sworn off all documentary work and the work that I've been doing for like the last 10 years. And so I was talking to the guy whose home I was in as I'm shooting his new kitchen, and he starts talking to me. And he goes, "Oh, you're a documentary filmmaker. What do you do?" And I said, "I do conservation films about, trying to protect land, this and that." And he goes, "Oh, well, you should make one about Iowa." And then he goes, "Let me get something for you." And he goes and he gets a copy of your book, and he puts it in my hands, and he goes, "This is the guy you need to talk to. The guy who wrote this book." And I was like, "Swine Republic?" I was like, what does that mean? Anyway, so your book was actually the starting point back in August of why I started this whole thing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I just thought you might want to know.
Yeah, that's a good story. Well, the book is, there's a lot of value in having a book, right? And that's, book sales is way down towards the bottom.
Right.
And so, anyway, so the book, got some notoriety, and but nonetheless, I had retired and just thought I would be this sort of gentleman farmer type, and I would spend my time fishing and gardening, and I have some fruit trees, and I would write my Substack, and everything would just be, copacetic, right?
Right.
But then, towards the end, second half of 2025, it wasn't apparent who might run as a Democratic candidate for Secretary of Agriculture. There was some speculation on some names, but there was some clamoring for me to do this, to run for Secretary of Agriculture, not from Democratic establishment types, but fans, so to speak.
Was it a difficult decision?
Yes, I spent months and months, and
because you're giving up your private life.
Exactly. I mean, I had everything I really ever wanted in life. 6 months ago. I was living the life I always dreamed of living. But I felt that this water quality thing here had such urgency, and there was not a lot of people that could talk about it honestly and truthfully, and in a way that connected with the public. And so people that work on these issues often are muzzled
Yeah.
or self-muzzled, and they see that if they say certain things or speak truthfully about this, it'll imperil their career, which it will.
Yeah.
And so consequently, people that know the most about this issue and can speak most authoritatively about it don't.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about you that I didn't actually put together until this conversation is that I'll bet it's really uncommon in any state for a Secretary of Agriculture to have a background like you do with you've actually done the boots on the ground work for water quality and hydrology studies and all that stuff. So you really understand what's happening to the land. That's fascinating.
And so I think the model here for the office is that it should be a farmer. And that, that was one of the main arguments against me. There was another Democratic candidate, briefly, he dropped out. He was a farmer. But I think the impression is that, it should be a farmer. Well, in 2013 in Iowa, we made the Secretary of Agriculture, we empowered that person to be in charge of water quality in the state of Iowa with the nutrient strategy. And so at least on the 85% of the land that's farmed. And so, having farmers occupy the office has not given us the environmental outcomes that we want. Right.
That's
and so it's
point. Right. Because it's so much bigger now. Now agriculture is connected to cancer rates.
Yeah.
And so if you just have a farmer who only knows about farming and they don't have an eye towards what's happening with nitrates and pesticides and all that, that's...
So ag policy affects everyone in a state like Iowa.
Yeah.
It affects everybody.
I think that's what out-of-staters don't get about Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an out-of-stater. I only moved here in 2024, so I cannot believe how much agriculture is just connected to every facet of life here.
So, 2.5% of the population is farmers, and if you include their spouses, that's 5% of the population.
What?
That's it. And so 95% of us are not in that category. And so why should the 95% just cede the office to a farmer?
Yeah.
And so ag policy is too big to just let ag determine everything about it. And so that's, one of the thrusts of my campaign. The other is that I tell people, this is a referendum on the condition of the state's water. If you think the condition of our water is adequate and that the pace that we're going on to improve it is adequate, then I'm probably not your person.
Yeah.
If you don't think our water quality is adequate, on the other hand, and you don't think we're making good progress, then maybe you should consider my candidacy.
Yeah. How long does a Secretary of Agriculture, how long are their terms of
4
service?
years.
For 4 years? Okay. All right.
So I had no aspirations of any sort of political career.
Yeah.
None. And I'm just doing this out of a sense of duty.
Okay.
That's it. And if I lose, I think already I've changed the discussion here. I'm making both parties kind of confront this issue.
Well, let me ask you about that real quick. Why do you care about the issue so much?
Well, this is my state. I grew up here, right? I've lived my life here. My children were here. They've left, right? Mm-hmm. Iowa has this terrible brain drain where, our young people are leaving the state for elsewhere. That's what my kids did. 2 of them live in Colorado and 1 lives in California.
Right.
And the condition of the environment is certainly one part of that, right?
Yeah.
And, they want to do outdoor stuff and, kayak and whatever. And, so they go where, we have mobility in society now. And so young people now choose where they want to live. And so that's what's happening here. Our young people are choosing to live elsewhere.
Yeah. And I definitely think the cancer rates are making some people literally think about moving.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And, do you want to die of old age or do you want to die of some ag-related cancer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to die of old age, right?
Yeah.
And I think most people would say that. But I'm doing it out of a sense of duty. I think the state needs to call a timeout here.
Yeah.
Call a timeout on this corn, soy, CAFO,
Yeah.
ethanol system we have here, and let's figure out a better way to use the best place on earth to grow stuff.
Okay, I just have one last question for you. I promise, just one. Well, when I called you, we had a pre-interview check-in call maybe about a week ago or so. And when I called you, you said, "Oh, I can't do it. The New York Times just called and they need to do an interview with me." And my first impression was like, wow, how does New York City know what's happening all the way out here with Iowa? So I'm just curious, have you been surprised at how far flung the interest has been in what's happening here?
Well, I mean, Mark Bittman did a thing mentioned me in my work in an article of his several years ago.
Is that a writer with the New York?
He's a food writer, Mark Bittman.
A food writer, okay.
And there's a friend of mine, retired from Iowa State. His work on sort of alternatives has been talked about in the New York Times before, so it's not unheard of.
Okay.
But I think the thing about Iowa is that we've had this first in the nation presidential caucus, right? We've had that since the 1970s. And so all these presidential candidates of both parties come here and they have to kneel at the altar of ethanol, especially, but also agriculture. And so I think the fact that we've had this first in the nation caucus has given us a disproportionate amount of attention. And I think people now there's a greater awareness about ethanol and, this question of why are we doing this? We're the top oil producing country in the world now.
Yeah.
And so why are we using all this farmland to produce ethanol? And in that process, we pollute our own water and so I think there's an awareness amongst people in the media that once they study this for a few hours, they do come around to this ethanol question. And again, why are we doing this? Why is the country committing this amount of resources here?
Is it? I lied. Now you led me to one more question. Do we produce a good amount of the ethanol that is produced in the USA here in Iowa? Or are we kind of an equal player with the states?
We're number one. What the
do.
percentage is of the country's ethanol, I'm not sure, but I know we're first. And so we have 42 ethanol plants here. I want to say we produce about 15%. I mean, we can look it up here.
That's kind of wild to think about, though, that the sacrifices that Iowans are paying health-wise for the way that corn is produced. I know. I mean, that's just.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah,
right?
That is crazy.
And so I think this cancer issue, has opened people's eyes a little bit.
Unfortunately, it seems like what it is taking. All right. Well, I promised that would be my last question.
Okay.
Well, I lied there.
We're done.
Yeah.
I don't know. 30? Okay. All right. That's a 30 minutes, I guess.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming and talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.